All right, we are back in session. We have a few more items to go on the, I can't ever remember the new name, Academic Research and Student Affairs Committee. And I will hand it back to Chairman Buchanan to finish up, and then we'll be back on track for the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman Christian. We left off at item D, so let's jump right in as Dean Blackadder here, Chancellor Blackadder is here. Thanks for, why don't you introduce this item for us, Chancellor Blackadder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'll put this up just a bit. If you remember from our September meeting, we had an information item on this describing our desire to have permission to grant doctoral programs in specific areas, and we had a conversation with the community and with the regents, and we're given some areas to look at, and those are on the board there, and I'll just go through each of those one at a time, and then talk briefly about them. In terms of our conversations around the system, certainly President Engstrom and I have been in conversation as well, and I have talked some with President Cruzado, and they have talked amongst themselves. We have had our provost in contact with each other in discussions. Our deans have been discussing it. There's actually, Dean Marley was actually ill for several weeks, and so that meeting has been postponed until November 22nd, but they're getting together and talking about shared programs, in particular collaborative courses that can be offered. And those are many of the issues that center around the MUS system and what's needed to be done there. On our own campus, we've had discussions with our advisory boards, continued discussions with constituents and industry in terms of needs that they need with economic development constituents in the area, in the state. We have had discussions with our student senate. Our ASMT president, Miles Pinnell, is here back there, and a student group there, and they have written a letter in support of doctoral programming from Montana Tech. So we've been in a variety of discussions around the state with each other, and I'll get into some of the details of some of that here in just a minute. The next item that you challenged me on in some ways is the funding and the potential funding, and listening even to the conversation over lunch today, talking about the need for the recognition of the funding levels in the state of Montana, and agreeing with Chair Christian about the woes of other states around the nation. I can attest to that firsthand, having come from one of those states. It is a challenging time, and one of the solutions that I believe that will help us as we move forward as a system is our ability to collaborate on our programs, and especially with smaller programs per se, or programs, graduate level programs that have smaller number of student numbers. The graduate programs in certain sciences are certainly in that realm for our state. And so as we've looked at that and we've tried to develop that, we were given, as you well know, $300,000 per year from the governor's office for developing PhD programs, and I understand the issues that may surround that, but we have been budgeting that money to hire a program director that will help us raise research funding in that area, particularly the materials, minerals, and natural resource area, and even to the extent of budgeting that money for seed projects around the state, not just at Montana Tech, and for providing technology infrastructure that may be needed to do collaborative course sharing between institutions. That money is there to be used for that as we develop programs. We've also had great support from Senator Tester and Baucus' office, including commitment of funding from Senator Baucus' office from economic development funds to help us with that. President Cruzado and I have been in conversations about state funding for positions from the state that would endow chairs in the natural resource area. We have recently received a grant from the Oil and Gas Board in the natural resource area, and in fact, I'd point out that in terms of the research since 2008, Montana Tech has garnered nearly $13 million in research funding for minerals and natural resource research on our campus. So we're very active in that area. It's one of those niche areas that supports a great deal of Montana revenue that has helped us sustain those state budgets that are fairly flat. Let me go on here. The collaboration and the curriculum. I talked about that just briefly prior to it. Again, our ability to collaborate within the MUS system on our graduate programs, I think, is one of those keys that we have to look at. And the word that I would use would be complementary, as opposed to maybe sometimes the discussion focusing around duplication. I think when you have small faculties, small programs, perhaps they're small student numbers, high student credit hours in some cases, that are doing research efforts, I think when you look around the state, we have a lot of expertise in collaboration and maybe not so much strength in terms of being able to provide the proper number of graduate courses, a robust offering of courses, and taking advantage of our niche areas. You know, you can look at examples that we have here, material science being one of them, and I know that we have circulating around the state the proposal for joint PhD programs in material science. That's an area where you look at the complementary areas that we could work in between polymers, ceramics, nano, extractive metallurgy. We have expertise in various places, the biomaterials that we have expertise at the University of Montana in Missoula. And so that's one of the things that I would encourage you to look at as you look at both our program and as you look at efficiencies within the system. We've already demonstrated that we can work within the system on some of these programs at small levels. For example, we have provided a subdivision design class that was, quote, beamed over to Bozeman that we have provided. We have also have one of the 8 PhDs granted last year at Montana State University in electrical engineering was advised by a Montana Tech faculty member, Dr. Trudnowski. We have 3 people in the joint MS program. They're actually officially enrolled in University of Montana, Missoula, the PhD program in the materials area. Technically, they'll get their degree in chemistry, but it is very heavily focused on the extractive metallurgy. We have 5 students that have indicated that they'd be interested in such a program, and in our case, 2 of those people are actually faculty members as we try to build the credentials of our faculty and provide them professional opportunities. And the 4th item there, the support of the strategic plan, if you'll allow me to remind the regents again about objectives to increase research and development receipts, increase the number and percentage of graduate students in the Montana University system, and increase graduate degree production and maintaining a strong connection in science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM fields. At our university, 67% of our students are actually enrolled in STEM fields. That's an incredibly high number. On our North Campus, the number is about 85%. And one of the other things that I failed to mention in terms of the potential funding is we have gone through a process at our university to look at our indirect costs that's garnered as a result of research contracts. And we have reallocated $150,000 a year towards our graduate programs from those indirect costs. So that's a baseline funding that we have made decisions on how we're going to spend our money and prioritize. And with that, I would entertain discussion on my report.
Thank you, Chancellor Blackadder. Appreciate the thorough presentation of this. Regent Barrett.
I mean, I appreciate the report. I guess what's your next logical step? What are you going to do next?
Well, I have to talk some with my boss. That seems to be important. But we would like to come forward in January with a proposal to have a joint collaborative PhD program in material science with degrees granted at each of those institutions in that area with focus areas in each of those institutions.
Yeah, and that would be, you would anticipate that coming as an information item so then we can chew on it and figure it out as opposed to an action item?
It would have to be a level 2. I'm getting the information from Royce. I'm still learning the process. I came from a different organization. But yes, with the intent to get an action item on it as soon as is within the process of the regents. Commissioner
Stearns.
I'm I think you've answered some of the questions, Chancellor Blackadder, Mr. Chairman, that have been brought forward, but I'm a little taken aback. I do think that I mean, was the $300,000, do you know, Chancellor Blackadder, appropriated to you or to our office or to us collectively or to President Engstrom? How is that working?
Our understanding is it says for the development of PhD programs at Montana Tech is how the wording, 604B was that bill. It's $300,000 per year for each of
And
the
Chancellor,
years.
did I understand you to say you're hiring a program director?
That's our intention, is to help us
Intention.
to find somebody that can be very active in raising funds in the area of research in the in material science and natural resource area, yes.
Well, and it could be, you know, lots of trains have gotten out of stations with me still on the platform, and I admit to sort of feeling I'm on the platform here, so I beg your assistance and indulgence
Sure.
in that of the President and that of Deputy Commissioner Moore, and as far as that goes, President Cruzado. I guess I thought the last time we talked about this, sometime, President Engstrom, sometime in the late fall, even, or excuse me, early fall, was that one of the expenditures you thought, or we thought might be useful for some of that 300,000 would be to have an independent study, perhaps by AAAS or someone, in regard to the independent verification need for the focus you're looking at, a terrific, fabulous institution, but one, if I remember correctly, produces 18 master's degrees, one that would be developing a PhD in the context of a university that has or has had engineering doctorates but has been somewhat constrained itself. And I just don't know the extent to which those conversations go sort of straight to the Board of Regents, or have you, maybe I'm missing the boat, I'm mixing metaphors here. First I'm a train on the station, now I'm a boat, missing the boat, maybe both. But what I guess I want to say is that usually when I'm this sort of flummoxed, it means I don't have, and I think the board does not have enough data. And so that's why I had been thinking, and I thought the last time I talked to the two presidents, and I thought we were going to soon include you in that conversation as opposed to jumping to January with a possible action item. That just strikes me as way faster than I would have the information I think I might need for a recommendation for the Board of Regents. But someone correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, in a bit of defense, I was asked what was my desire.
That is a clarification that I didn't hear. Thank you.
At least that's what I heard.
Okay. This is what you would like to happen in the timetable you'd like it to happen. That is a little different. I guess I was hearing you say this is what is scheduled to happen, and that's what started with me. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, please. Well, then, I thank Sheila for asking that question, because I didn't maybe quite pick up on what you said. The person is, you talk about hiring a director, whatever you're going to call him. Is that something you desire? Is that something you're planning on doing?
Yes.
No.
What?
Yes, that's two questions.
Oh.
I know you wanted, is it something you plan on doing with the current money allocated to you now, before you know if the programs are approved?
Well, I think our desire to have people who can help us raise research funding in the area of minerals, metals, natural resources is there, whether or not
Okay.
we have that program in place. And so it's not any, if you will, waste of money. I think it's a very viable position for us to go after in terms of seeking resources for our graduate programs. And Commissioner Stearns, forgive me, I will tell you that when you look over the last 4 or 5 years, our master's production has been in the 30-35 range. It was actually 40 in 2011. It's a pretty respectable graduate student production. It goes up and down, as you know, over time, but.
And just to follow
Regent
up,
Barrett.
and I agree with you, that a person doing that task is important for your college or university, regardless of the programs. yeah, apparently you're prepared when this funding in this 604 or whatever it is runs out, to allocate something else to maintain that person.
And that's where we have allocated our indirect costs
Okay.
as part of that process to make sure that we can continue on that effort. Yes, sir.
Good question. President Ingstrom.
Chairman Buchanan, members of the board, thank you. I think that what Chancellor Blackketter is saying is that he has a research area, a research niche that can be developed in a very productive, constructive way for the state of Montana, for the institution of Montana Tech. Whether that ultimately leads to PhD work is yet to be decided down the road at some point. But he should, in my opinion, take advantage of the opportunity to develop a research niche on his campus. And I think in hiring a program director, as Chancellor Blackketter is calling it, really the responsibilities of such a person would be twofold. One, to think about developing that research niche in a way that might not lead to PhD work down the road. And secondly, doing, Commissioner Stearns, the kind of analysis that we have talked about. Is this a niche area that is good for the state of Montana, good for Montana Tech? And so obviously we need more clarifying conversation there, but as far as bringing a proposal forward in January, obviously we need to talk more about that, as Chancellor Blackketter said. But that proposal has been under development in some form for the past year or two, and so certainly at some point in the not too distant future, we want to resolve the fate of that material science effort. So, thank you.
Chairman Christian.
Just a comment, because I think it's helpful, or at least I perceive it to be helpful for you guys to know at least where some board members' perspective is. And I think, President Ingstrom, to your choice of words, for me, this consideration has a lot to do with that niche language. I think if that doesn't exist, I think in my mind, the conversation moves forward if there's something that is so uniquely interesting to Montana Tech, and it's a niche that is unique to what Montana Tech can provide, it's a very valuable conversation to have. To what extent it doesn't fall into something that's very unique to what Montana Tech can provide, and one of the other institutions that's already a doctoral granting institution can do the same work. I mean, it's back to this same resource conversation we're having. I don't see a panel up here hoping to just think of ways we can expand the system. So I think that's very important in my mind, that it's uniquely Montana Tech for this conversation when it moves forward, or if it moves forward, that it fills a niche.
Regent Christian, and I agree with you. I also would just respectfully remind you, I think those complementary programs, I think the material science area is a good example of programs that exist at University of Montana and Montana State, but there's also areas that can complement that greatly in the state, and looking how we can share those expertise around the state, I think, is part of that process.
Yes. There have been many important conversations with different people between Montana Tech and Montana State University, and I encourage the Chancellor to continue the conversations. With the Commissioner, I will also submit that it was my understanding that where we left it at the point of conversation with the Commissioner, and in a conversation also with President Engstrom, was when I communicated to him that there's a committee, there's a group of faculty members at Montana State University who has been engaged in the material science conversation, and their strong recommendation is that we jointly move into an opportunity to invite an external panel who can guide us. Some names were mentioned, and I communicated this to President Engstrom, including the AAAS. Given the fact that we have that source of funds, that can be a great use of those monies. And I think that that will be a wonderful opportunity for all faculty, irrespective of campus, to have an objective approach to what we can offer that will benefit our students and other constituencies. So I just wanted to, I think that we have been talking about the same thing, perhaps in a different order, but I just wanted to reassure the commissioner that that was my understanding as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that was my understanding as well, that there have been some good conversations going on between the faculty. And a couple of things I guess I want to speak to in regards to this. We spoke this morning about the pooling of resources and very unique collaborative opportunities. And I was thinking to myself that action item A on this agenda this morning spoke to exactly the direction that this item was heading, and in regards to the pooling of resources and collaborating and thinking differently than we've ever thought before about not expanding the system, but instead expanding opportunities for our students. And that's how I see it, and I certainly look forward to the conversation as it progresses. It seems like our state, the well-being of our state, could see a number of great things come out of this, and I think it would contribute greatly to the overall well-being of Montana and for the students that we serve. And I support the conversation moving forward and look forward to you bringing it to us for an action item so that we can provide opportunities for our students on the Montana Tech campus to earn PhDs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Regent McLean. Any other comments or questions at this point? I know personally I need some more education related to what types of PhD programs we have already. I mean, I couldn't make a guess as to what programs we have, what the topics are, and although it seems at first blush material science very consistent with the niche that Montana Tech is developing with their undergraduate and master's programs, I'd certainly love to know how we've identified that one as the one that we want to pursue first. And I think your presentation is great, and your leadership in advocating on behalf of your institution immediately upon taking the steering wheel is much appreciated and deserving of recognition and continuation of this conversation. I think I'm hearing collectively some more information is what we're looking for before we're forced to consider something. So as a couple of ideas, for me, I'd love a picture maybe from Dr. Ingston and Dr. Cruzado. What are we already doing? What is our portfolio of PhD programs? And then just some kind of strategic perspective into how did we pinpoint this program as the first one. And I don't know if there's any other ideas for further information that we need, anybody else may have as an interest at this table, but I certainly, Regent Teal.
And I know this was discussed a little bit at the previous meeting, but I'm still a little behind on how exactly the collaborative approach would work functionally. And so I'd like to learn more about that as well.
Okay.
President Engstrom, please.
Chair Buchanan, members of the board, a few years ago, probably about 3 years ago, at one point we brought to the board a study of our doctoral offerings as a state. And we did an inventory of what we have and, the number of students graduated and so on. And so it would be relatively easy to bring that up to date now and make that a part of the discussion, really an inventory of where we are in terms of doctoral education among the campuses in the state. And perhaps that would be a good topic of discussion surrounding the annual research reporting that goes on under Deputy Commissioner Moore's direction.
If I might ask too, one of the perspectives I'm interested in is the operational perspective, the funding mechanisms, the operations that fuel that, the fundraising that's mentioned. I mean, I know and understand that it's very expensive and consuming of not only financial resources, but commitment from those professors and students engaged in some sort of perspective into that impact of developing and maintaining the programs that we currently have, I think would be beneficial. But I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Any members of the leadership table interested in weighing in or asking any questions? Chancellor Blackketter, any further thoughts or?
No, thank you. I think I have some good action items to move forward on.
Couldn't
Thank
thank-
you.
couldn't thank you enough for your
Thank you for the
presentation.
opportunity.
And Mr. Chairman, I certainly
Please.
pledge that I will communicate more thoroughly to be better informed with you and with President Engstrom and Deputy Commissioner Moore. I appreciate that very much.
Thank
Well, I
you.
think it's important to note that this is a very healthy part of the dialogue. I mean, as long as I've sat on the board, we've alluded to starting this discussion, and so this seems like a good starting point, and I'm very appreciative for your commitment to it.
Thank you.
I think we all are.
Thank you, Board.
I'm having a computer challenge, so I don't have my agenda right in front of me. I know. I know the next item. Get going. There it is. Thank you very much. Digital learning, right. Deputy Commissioner Moore, would you help us kick that one off?
I'd be happy to. Actually, this came out of some communications that the commissioner shared with me about some excitement that a couple of the board members had about learning about digital resources for supporting our learning environments. And I had happened to have been over on the Missoula campus talking to the head of the bookstore about some stuff they were doing. So Provost Brown, I asked to give a quick report on that. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Chairman Buchanan and members of the committee, I'm Perry Brown. I'm the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Montana, Missoula. Deputy Commissioner Moore simply asked me to take a few minutes and just share with you about a project that is underway on the UM campus and headed by the bookstore that's dealing with basically the cost of textbooks and how they can be provided from an e-textbook standpoint. A little bit different than regular e-books, I think, because a textbook is a very, very specialized market and some extra special rules that are complicated attend to it. But Brian Thornton, the director of the bookstore at the University of Montana, Missoula, has been heading up a project because he is very, very concerned about the high cost of textbooks. So this is coming from a bookseller that is really concerned about this and wants to see what we can do about it and has been working on this for the last couple of years. The motivation very much is to reduce the cost of books to students. And we know that as we talk with parents and we talk with students, this is a major issue because sometimes the books cost more than a lot of other things that they're buying in the university system, and so we need to attend to this particular issue. Working with Pearson, which is one of the large textbook suppliers, we have implemented on campus a pilot project right now. It involves 4 math courses and 2 biology courses, and over 1,700 students are enrolled in these courses that are in the pilot program right now. So we have these courses, multiple sections of the math courses, multiple sections of the biology courses, and over 1,700 students involved in this particular project. How does it work? It's really quite simple. The students register for the course. The students then are given a unique password to access the materials that Pearson has on their computer. So it's cloud computing coming to the university. They, on their servers, have the textbooks and all of the materials that go with them. The students that are registered for the course then get their unique password. It's unique to each individual. So we don't have one password for a whole bunch of people that they can trade. Each student has a password and gets onto this thing. And then the course proceeds. That's the way it works. And it's a pretty simple thing. Now, you know, there is a cost for this kind of service, and that has to be paid for. Right now, because it's a pilot, the bookstore at the University of Montana, Missoula is actually covering the costs because the bookstore manager is so interested in the project, he's willing to pick up the tab in this initial activity. But at some point, and I'll mention that a little bit later, we're going to have to figure out how best to charge the students for this. For the pilot that's underway right now, once the students have completed the course, both the students and the faculty members will be surveyed about the success. So we're going to assess just how this worked for everybody, what kinds of things worked, what kinds of things were difficult, and try to get an idea on how this thing can go forward in the future. The goal that we have had working with Pearson is to charge less than 50% of the cost of a used textbook. So it's really a major reduction in cost. You've got new textbooks, you've got used textbooks, and this is less than 50% of the cost of a used textbook. And so we're really trying to drive the cost back. The availability for students is from day one. If they have registered for the course, they get their passport, they have the password, they have access to the materials online right then. So if their financial aid hasn't come in yet, it doesn't really matter. They have access immediately. They do, or somebody has to pay eventually, but it's not waiting on some check to arrive and be transferred. They get access immediately. There are some really nice options to this, and one of which is many of the textbooks actually have homework assignments associated with those. The students can engage in that homework if it's assigned by the instructor, and the instructor can go in and see how each student is doing with regard to the homework. Say it's a math course. How many times did they have to try this particular problem before they got it? And you begin to understand where they're having difficulties, where they're having successes, what concepts they're catching on to right away. You can actually go in and look at their individual work and see, oh, that's where they made a calculation error, so it's not a big problem, or this is where they didn't even understand the concept. And so you can begin to examine these kinds of things from this. And so that you can diagnose problems, you can see how the students are doing individually, or you can aggregate that and see how the class is doing collectively with these materials. One of the drawbacks to the system is there's no way to opt out. If you're enrolled for the course, you have to have the course materials, and the only way to get them is this way. There's no simple way to trade these things around. There's no way to go to the library and get these things. You can't opt out. And that's a requirement that the textbook sellers are having. But the costs are considerably lower, so I think it does help out quite a bit. If a student drops out of the course, the arrangement we have right now is that they get their money back. If a student fails the course, heaven forbid, but if they do, and they have to retake the course, they simply get assigned a new password and access to the material without having to purchase a second time around. And so there's no additional cost. They can retake the course and they will have access to the same textbook materials and the same homework assignments and things like they got the first time. So the one thing that we're going to need eventually, not now, not today, I'm not asking, I'm just informing you about this experiment's going on, and hopefully it's going to work fairly well. It probably won't work for every course and every kind of textbook that's possible out there, but there certainly are a lot of them I think this is going to work for, and if we can drive the cost down a lot, I think we can really help the access issues and help students with the finances here. But what we're going to have to ask for eventually is a request for a fee so that really the textbook becomes part of what they're paying when they sign up for the course. That is the most efficient way to transfer the funds, rather than having a bunch of individual payments or something like that outside of what they have when they actually pay their bill to the university. One stop, one payment, get it done. So at some point, if this thing goes forward, we'll come back and ask for that kind of assistance so that we can really have a very efficient system for the students paying for these things. But anyway, we will be back to let you know how this experiment is working. But I think it's the kind of thing that you're going to see happening around the country over the next few years. More and more of this. There are already some programs that have bits of this going on. We're experimenting with it. We're trying to make it happen. We're actually talking with some other textbook suppliers besides Pearson at this particular time. So that's happening. I would also mention to you that there is a guest editorial in the most recent issue of the Chronicle that talks about the person that wrote this says, the first university that goes completely e-textbooks is going to make a big mark in the world. Then he goes on to explain why it might be difficult to do that, but there is. So we know that that discussion is going on across the country as well.
Thanks. Chancellor Groseth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Just a little different take on this, but aimed at exactly the same thing, the high cost of purchasing books. Our campus began this year renting books, and we figure in our first semester we've saved our students about $60,000, and that program will grow, and ones like this, I think we'll all be trying something like this to see which works best for our campuses.
Great, thank you.
Right. If I could just comment on that, I mean, that's another activity that we have going on campus as well as we're renting books. I do understand that that is the highest margin right now for the booksellers, is renting books. They make a greater margin on that. I'm not exactly sure how that all works, but that's good for them and it's good for the students, just as Chancellor Groseth said.
Regent Barrett.
I really thank you for the report, and I'm keenly interested in this, and I guess want to pass on something that has occurred and I've been thinking about, and I was thinking about how I would bring it up, but I had occasion a few weeks ago, just by happenstance, I was talking to a gentleman who had retired from the Education Division of McGraw-Hill, so very familiar with this model, and he too, even as a bookseller, said, basically, he said the publishing industry, the education public industry, is where the music industry was a few years ago. And things are being shared and downloaded, and they're going to lose unless they find a way to adapt. And the way to adapt is to be electronic and create some models. What he suggested, and was very enthusiastic about, and I'll just take what he said as a fact without having proven it, but he had a pretty good background. He said his experience in the field was twofold. One of the barriers, for a while, one of the barriers has been student access, and that's pretty well gone now because there's hardly a student now who doesn't have the computer access. But it's also been a psychological barrier he has found on the part of faculty. They had a rightful concern about picking a methodology. For example, let's go to electronic format, forget the purchase book, where a student might not have access. His comment was, and he rattled off a series of sort of common standard accounting book, economic book, things that many people take in their freshman year, that the electronic versions of those were so inexpensive that an institution, if they had a program, they were fairly well evolved, could essentially provide free an iPad to every student, and the first tranche of books would more than pay for it. And you could deal with other issues like utilizing for other things with some limiting software, so it could just be used for the books or whatever, but there was a model there where you really could go totally electronic. Now, those are big leaps, and I'm not suggesting we run do them, but all I can say is I'm keenly interested in what happens there. And I think it's something that really deserves exploration. And I think the book industry wants to get there with us. They want to get there with education, or the cost will get so much that students will be demanding of professors, and professors will be picking content that's already available online, saying, that's my book. And the booksellers are going to be cut out, and they don't want to be left. So they're ready to jump into the pool with you, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Regent Barrett.
Much for the report. Oh, sorry, Regent Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, and maybe I missed something at the beginning of the presentation, but when do you expect to have at least some data to be able to bring back and start to discuss that?
We will have the data at the end of this semester when the course completes in December, or the course is complete in December, then we will have all of this survey information and from both faculty and students, and we'll know what we've got. So by January or March, certainly we'll have something we can bring back to you.
That's great, thank you. And I think I just wanted to echo what what Regent Barrett was saying too, is that what I think needs to be kind of part of that conversation is the means too, besides just the product itself. Keeping in mind, you know, how are we going to deliver this? And certainly it's great to consider that cost savings and how it might translate, but how to actually get it to the students for them to utilize. I imagine even if they have access to computers, it's not as easy to grab that computer sometimes and go over to some other location in order to make use of their textbooks too. But I think those things need to be considered as we move forward.
Right, and Regent Robinson, that's part of the test that's going on to see how this works, what kind of access they have. But our students, not only a lot of them have their own iPads or computers or something that they're hauling around, but in addition, we have a lot of other locations, and we have some locations that actually make computers available to students right in the classroom if they don't have their own. So I think that's a really important issue, and we need to see just how well we can or how well the students are prepared to be able to accept this. But it's really happening now that these young people, most of them, have access, either their own or a way to obtain that we help them with. So I think we're getting very close to being able to have universal access. And just a little bit more electronic access, wireless access on campus is not every single place, but a little bit more of that, and we'll pretty well have it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much, Provost Brown.
Thank you.
Appreciate the report. Deputy Commissioner Moore, would you help us dive into item G, Northwest Commission of Core Themes, please?
Thank you, Chairman Buchanan. For the benefit of time, and unless there are specific questions, the themes are listed. This is part of the Northwest accreditation process, and we will continue to bring this information to the board as people work through that now 7-year continuous improvement project that is our accreditation process. So I just want to thank both of those campuses for providing that information to us, and it comes in the form of our accreditation reporting responsibility. I'm going to skip over item H and go to the program reviews. The program reviews also have been posted and available for people to look at, and I guess at this point, rather than pull everybody up, just ask if there were any concerns or questions that anybody wanted to raise.
Regent Barrett.
Did you give me a look?
I did not. I would never be guilty of giving you a look.
I'll simply say what I've said before. These are good to have these program reviews. And every time I read one, I like reading it and seeing what they're going, and I keep realizing, in a way, they're not particularly valuable information for us because we simply don't know enough because they're numbers and they tell us something, but they don't tell us what we really, really need to know. And that's not your fault. That's just kind of what the process is. That is, it gives you some numbers and you look at those things and you may see a program's going to be discontinued. I saw a few of those. That's good. And I'm not for killing programs, but it means someone looked at something and came to a conclusion. You see a lot of programs where just the data would suggest why they're doing this. Of course, what we don't know, and it's something I mentioned earlier, that it's a service program or something. So that's one comment. I just don't know how valuable this is to us. It may be properly utilized. The other thing that occurs to me is if there is going to be a review and decisions are going to be made about eliminating programs, and this isn't, of course, comparing one program to the other. This is just comparing one program against itself. There is no prioritization concept in this. And it says in here there's a 7-year cycle about when these things are done. And I've been reading these things now for 6+ years. And there are never enough programs. I mean, I know how many programs we have on our campuses. We don't get through them in 7 years. I don't know where the miss is, or maybe a really big one went by and I didn't see it or something. But I just don't see really a review of all the programs, at least at this level, in time to review them in a 7-year cycle. So maybe I just need education about that. So my point is, I'm glad we're doing it. I just don't know how good a data it is for us to look at, because we almost have to say, well, good. Because every time you look at it and say, well, what about the numbers, then you get the explanation why the numbers don't matter in that instance. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, what kind of report is it that doesn't really tell us anything? Or maybe I just don't know enough to read it right.
Well, just in one quick response to say that the program reviews are probably of most use to the campuses, and they are part of accreditation and quality control processes. And what you find when you look through these, even as we have concerns about what does that mean for us at this level, frequently those have been amassed at the campus level. So like you'll see all of biochemistry reviewed or all of a science area reviewed. They vary a bit by the resources that are available on the campus. So the bigger campuses can get outside reviewers sometimes that the smaller campuses can't. Also, some programs do fall off before the 7-year cycle. We also do not require program review for the community colleges. So just to point out some of those differences. One quick shout out, since we did dwell on this for just a moment. If you looked at techs, you will see where they made a significant shift in something that they're doing in response to the College Now initiative. And so I think sometimes we do learn things out of these that are not necessarily looking at the quality, but looking at what the campuses are doing with the information.
So, and I'm going to maybe echo some of Regent Barrett's sentiments. And I asked a question about this previously in our call with the academic officers. I noticed that at each separate university and institution, program reviews are gone about in a somewhat different way. So I find for me it's sometimes hard to compare the information too. So whereas UM seems to have a practice of having outside reviewers come and review entire departments at a single time, MSU has a process of paying a special notice to departments that are below a certain threshold of graduates. And I think that it might be important for the campuses maybe to have a discussion, or us to have a discussion, especially as we're doing a program prioritization process of how can we make, because I think that program reviews, while different than prioritization, can also be another really good tool on a system-wide level if we're doing it in a careful manner. And I think that as we're going through program prioritization, this is the process that we make prioritization valuable long-term. And so I think it might be a good conversation for us to take up.
Oh, well, Commissioner, I don't know, maybe I'm going to say what you were going to say, and I'll jump in. But I was going to say we can pull the policy. The chief academic officers can put that on their agenda for their next meeting, and we can see if we want to come back with some recommendations or some sort of justification to the board, if that's acceptable to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could add, sometimes when I feel a little puzzled, as I think you were just talking about, Regent Barrett, or about what we're doing, or I had questions, it often is because I don't have enough good information, as I think perhaps I just showed with my questions to Chancellor Blackketter, or the policy, most of what you do, members of the board, relates to a policy. And that's what your chancellors and presidents and deans are responding to. So I quickly pulled up 303.3, and if I think, for example, Regents Teal and Barrett, you know, I suggest that we all take another look at it, because if on, not right this moment, please, I understand that, but it says in the very last, upon the receipt of the annual report, the Montana Board of Regents has the authority to ask for additional information, to justify the decision, to ask to change the decision, or whatever. Now, that still may not be enough, especially since we're considering comparative program alignment. But if this policy isn't quite accurate, by golly, the campuses need to know, because they're following a policy that we designed for them. So, and I know you don't disagree, but policy matters, information matters, and communication matters, and we need to do a good job of that so that we don't leave our campuses doing work that they wouldn't have to do. Thank you.
So we'll review the review process. Move forward. I think it's a good approach.
Begin with E.
Referencing item D, we believe that discussion validates quite a bit more time than we have. So if tomorrow's committee meeting we reconvene, we find some time, we'll do it. If not, we'll bring it up as a committee between now and the next meeting to give it the time and attention it deserves. So with that said, I think it's required to ask for public comment as it relates to items on the Academic Research and Student Affairs Committee before we pass back to Major. Please.
My name is Miles Pinnell, and I'm the ASMT president at Montana Tech, and I wanted to address the discussion regarding the PhD development program at Montana Tech. And I just wanted to say that we took this before our Senate, and we really discussed the pros and the cons of having a PhD program at Montana Tech in those niche areas that you've been talking about. And at first, we ran into a lot of opposition with our student senators in thinking that it was a bad idea and that it would take away particularly from the undergraduate education that we receive right now at Montana Tech. And, but as we continue to look into that, what our senators found from talking to faculty and talking to other students over a 6-week period is that we were able to get all of our questions answered by our administration in regards to the benefits of developing a PhD program, and we unanimously voted on Tuesday to support the development of a PhD program at Montana Tech. And obviously, there was a lack of communication somewhere along the way between our administration and the board as far as what our plans are. But we're very serious about this as a campus, about developing a PhD program. I think it's something that would greatly benefit the state and would benefit the flagship programs and campuses. And I think it's just something that I want to make sure you guys realize that we are looking at this very seriously, and I would just appreciate if you guys just could be as informed as possible when this is brought up again. We're just very serious about it. And Montana Tech students fully support our administration's plans. So, thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Any other comments? David?
Regent Buchanan and members of the board, thank you. My name is Dave Beck. I'm from the University of Montana, and I'm basically just going to reiterate the comment I think that I made at the last board meeting, which is that I'm a third-generation educator, second generation in higher ed. I think one of the most dishonorable things we've done to higher education is place the burden of cost on students who can least afford it. I'm not talking about us as a University of Montana system. I'm talking about within the United States. I'd like to commend you for taking on the issue of affordability. I was a little bit stunned to see the statistics that showed that the students who are the most, coming from the most impoverished situations have the highest loan debt and the highest, it's obvious that they would have the highest percentage of loans. And I would also urge you and all of us to try to come to solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Beck. Any further public comment related to the items on this agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, finally, we give you back the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan. I think we'll move then right to the campus panel discussion, if we could. I believe that's next up.
Okay, would you like us to just go ahead and start, Mr.
Certainly,
Chairman?
please.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to have some good conversation here. The topic that our campuses are going to focus on is the topic of academic innovation. And academic innovation in the context of programming, formal and otherwise, aimed at providing access to students, aimed at providing an education appropriate for Montana, appropriate for our nation's needs, and appropriate for the time that we find ourselves in. Innovations that maximize special opportunities for students, and innovations that focus on completion, success. Each of our campuses, of course, has distinctive programming and a distinctive learning environment, giving students quite a range of possibilities for their education. The faculty, staff, and the administration at our campuses undergo innovation in an ongoing sense. And so we're going to ask each of our campuses just to provide some examples of innovation going on their respective campus. And in the interest of generating conversation, at the end of each of their comments, they are going to put forward a question that we hope challenges you to engage in the dialogue. Before I turn it over to them, though, I want to highlight three things myself that focus on really affiliation-wide efforts. And so, Summer, if you could put that slide up first of all. This morning, Chairman Christian spoke to the Grateful Nation project. I wanted to just show you a photo of the memorial that was dedicated on our campus a week or so ago. This was, I would say, one of the most moving days that I've had in my career. 600 and some people attended the ceremony, made a very solemn walk from the theater on up to the memorial for the actual unveiling. You could hear a pin drop as people gathered around the memorial. I've gone by the memorial several days since then, and without exception, there is always somebody there at the memorial meditating, looking at the names on the blocks below, or just standing and looking at the memorial. This was the dedicated effort of one of our alumnus of ours, David Bell. He funded the memorial in its entirety and made a gift of it to the University of Montana. I put this up here because each of our campuses has efforts going on in the area of education for veterans, education and appreciation of people serving in the military. And so, for example, we just opened a new Veterans Center on our campus as well, and it had an open house on the same weekend as the memorial dedication. We had a military reunion on our campus, the first one of its kind. So former students who had served in the military in any time period came out for that reunion. It was just a fantastic event. So I just want you to know that each of our campuses has efforts going on in the area of serving veterans and people in the military. Several campuses have been designated as military-friendly campuses, for example. Secondly, we have engaged in what we call the University of Montana Campus Days. And so we have had 2 of these now, where all 4 campuses converge on one of our campuses for a day of discussion. Half of that day is spent giving that campus the opportunity to showcase the special things on that campus, the things that make it a distinctive learning environment. The other half of the day is spent on discussing some issue of importance to all of us. The first campus day was on the Helena campus last spring. The topic of discussion was, in fact, student success. We had a very robust discussion during the course of the afternoon on really what you might call best practices for student success among our campuses. A few weeks ago, we had our second Campus Day on the Western campus. And of course, we had a great opportunity to see the Experience One opportunities afforded to the students on the Western campus. But the topic of discussion among all of us then that afternoon was the topic of assessment. And so we all are involved in assessment at so many different levels, ranging from institutional accreditation down to individual program review, as we just discussed. So again, we had a really good discussion among all 4 campuses on that topic of assessment. So that has proven to be a practice among the affiliate campuses that is very helpful to us, these Campus Days. Thirdly, following up on this morning's comments as well, we just undertook tour of the tribal colleges around the state, and all 4 leaders of the campuses were involved in those visits. So we were able to visit the Blackfeet Reservation and Community College there, Stonechild, Little Bighorn, Chief Dull Knife, and Fort Peck, and we have SKC scheduled for a few weeks from now. We'll pick up Fort Belknap in the spring. On all of those campuses, the main topic of discussion was this topic of student success. Student success for students in the community colleges now, for students who begin their studies on one of our campuses, and for students who transfer from one of the community colleges to our campuses. Very, very helpful discussions, and I was quite proud of our affiliation for having all of the leadership so engaged in those discussions. And so those will be ongoing as we move through this next year. So with those opening comments, I'm going to ask first Chancellor Story to talk about some things at UM Western and pose some questions for us to think about.
Thank you, President Engstrom and members of the board. What is going around is what I was asked about earlier this morning. It's a one page. It announces that for the third year in a row, we have a professor who has been recognized nationally. And in this case, it is Professor Julie Ballard, who teaches in our early childhood education program. She has been named Montana Professor of the Year by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and the Counselor for the Advancement and Support of Teaching. These are out of Washington, D.C., as many of you know. It is, as I explained this morning, the third time we've had a faculty member honored. 2 years ago, Rob Thomas was named National Professor of the Year, as many of you know. Last year, Delina Norris Tull in our Education Department was named Montana Professor of the Year. And quite to our delight, we've had 3 in a row. We're not sure how many campuses around the country have been that fortunate. We've looked into it. We haven't found any other. There probably are. But we're really quite proud of our faculty, and she's done a great job. She just told me, and some of you may know this, that only 27 states actually had a Professor of the Year award this year. They named 4 national, depending upon the university's scope, but they do not always name a state winner. So they're quite selective about that. So Montana has been fortunate enough to have 2 state winners and a national winner in the last 3 years. And obviously we are bursting with pride over our faculty. And we recognize that Experience One, and I'll come back to that in just a minute, is a part of the success of our faculty and their emphasis on experiential teaching and learning. So that's the brag point that you give one of us a microphone and it's going to happen, right? We are working on our strategic plan based upon our core themes, and Provost Ulrich, who will say a few words in a minute, is spearheading that committee. Our current strategic plan goes through 2012, and we are already starting to update that plan. I want to tell you a quick introduction to a couple things, and I will ask Provost Ulrich to expand. One thing we are trying to do is help our students in success in terms of earning an associate degree. And some of you may not even know that Montana Western has a 2-year degree program, but we certainly do, and we've had it for a long time. We don't have as many students as we would like who actually earn the associate degree. So one thing we've done is said, well, maybe if we tap these students on the shoulder and say, hey, you've already earned an associate degree along the path to a bachelor's degree, or you're nearly there with another course, and you could have this degree, and we want to make it very simple for them. So that's something we've been talking about on campus, is to help our students see that success step along to a bachelor's degree and have that. And I'll let the Provost explain a little bit more. The other thing we've been working hard on is our general education program. We, like many campuses, have found that our students will sometimes go into their 3rd and 4th year at the campus and have completed much, if not all, of the requirements for a major, but they haven't done their general education requirements. What that means is that they then enroll in the gen ed classes, and our 1st and 2nd year students don't have access to them. So it kind of rolls upon itself. And we're trying to work on that, not just in terms of faculty agreeing about what a curriculum should be in general education, but also trying to find ways to convince students that general education is just not this requirement, this sort of pain in the neck for many of them, but that there's value to that kind of an education. There's value to an engineer taking an art class, a history major taking an economics class, etc. Something that I think most of us understand. So we've been working hard at that. And with that brief introduction, I'll turn this to Provost Ulrich because he lives and breathes this every day, and then I'll come back with the question for you. Carl.
Thank you, Chancellor Story. One of the things we've done is have our advising office go through the records, academic records of all the students who initially were enrolled in our two-year programs. Some of these students did that by choice, but some of them did that because they needed remediation before they could enter into a bachelor's program. What has happened in the past is that some of these students have gone on and enrolled in our bachelor programs, and some of them, a good proportion of them, have been very significant, but they have not applied for the associate degree that they actually, in many cases, have earned. And that, of course, can affect our graduation rate because the initial program in which a student enrolled is the one that's counted in the IPEDS data. So it's very important for us to improve our graduation rate, to have these students apply for the associate degree and be awarded that degree. So we're making it as easy as possible for them to do that. Basically, we're doing all the paperwork for them. We're waiving the graduation fee. And so we expect that to improve our graduation statistics and give them a pat on the back credential, a two-year credential along the way to their bigger program. I also have just earlier this week on Monday, I called together the Strategic Planning Task Force, which has 7 people, faculty, staff, students, and administrators, and we've begun working on that new strategic plan that will take effect in 2012. One of the things I've done is I've started using Moodle, our course support software, for some of my tasks, and it's going to work out pretty well, I think, for me to manage all these strategic planning activities. So I think I'm practicing what the students and our faculty are having to do, and it's a very useful tool for not only teaching students but also for management types of things. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
President Engstrom asked me to pose a question for you. We actually are in our 7th year of full engagement in Experience One. And I realize that the veterans in the room have probably heard more about Experience One from me and others than they really care to hear. But it also strikes me that it might be a good opportunity for newer people to ask us some questions about it. So in a nutshell, Experience One involves teaching block courses, which meet for 3.5 weeks at a time. Students take and faculty teach one course at a time. They are immersed in the topic. We focus on experiential learning, and we think it's been very successful with our students. Their retention rate has gone up, student success rate has gone up, etc. So we remain the only public university in the United States that uses block scheduling. There are 2 or 3 private schools that do. There have been a number of schools that have talked with us about going to block scheduling. So far, I don't believe anybody have actually done that, so we remain unique in that, and it certainly creates a niche for us. But I would be happy to answer any questions that any members of the board or anyone else has about Experience One and block scheduling or any of the other things that we have mentioned today.
Regent Tess.
Chancellor, with Experience One, what is the profile of the student now that is engaged in that versus what that profile perhaps looked like 10 years ago? Is it a different kind of student at Western?
Very good question, and we don't have as much good kind of concrete data about that we wish we had in hindsight. I think what happens with block scheduling is that it selects to some degree for students and for faculty who are pretty well organized in their time. I tell prospective students that block scheduling is not for procrastinators. It doesn't work because you or a faculty member are on about 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for 18 days. And if you procrastinate, you're going to fall behind. So it may select for some students that tend to be organized or maybe need the nudging towards being organized. The experiential learning, I think, is also a big part of it, because our faculty, for example, can take students on a field trip in geology or a field trip to a business in Bozeman, wherever it may be, and they can spend the entire day at that. So I'm not sure that we've actually selected for students in many other different ways, except certainly the block scheduling appeals to them. And I have people repeatedly tell me, including just yesterday, a state senator who spoke with one of our classes and asked them about block scheduling, and she said, quote, "They told me they loved it."
Any other questions? I think you're off the hook.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I look at the topic, it says goals, plans, and challenges, and I say to that, yes. We have all of those at Helena, and we focus in on student success in regards to all three of those items. I was really pleased to listen to the conversation this morning from the MSU campuses about the processes that they have there for advisement, which gets into, I think, the retention issue of keeping those students around a lot longer. We have focused on that also at Helena in our student services area, and adjusting where our personnel are, what we do, how we do it, so that we can focus in on that student as an individual, and then focus in on retaining that student over time. The statistics show at Helena that one of the reasons why the enrollment has been going up is not because we're getting a lot of new students, but we're doing a better job at retaining who we have, and then working with high school outreach. And that's where a lot of those students are coming from right now. We thought this academic year that our enrollment actually would pretty much well be flat. But what we found out is we picked up an additional 170 students this semester over last year. And that's primarily where it came from, is in retention and in working on outreach with high schools. In our remodeling of our facilities and moving things around, we were able to create one-stop centers for our student services in the area of advising, learning, and career placement and career advisement. We also picked up this year and had started implementing this year a TRIO program, and this is our first year in that program. We have 110 students at this point in time in the TRIO program. We have remodeled some space on the campus, given TRIO a very designated and special space where those students can come, feel like they are important. We can focus in on their needs. They get a great deal more tutoring, a great deal more advising, a deal of hand-holding than we have in the past, to help those students who are first-generation students, low income, have all the things that would say strike 1, 2, and 3 against them, and then apply all our resources around them to help them to become successful. On top of that, two-year education prides itself on being developmental education in many respects, our pre-100 level courses. And we have been focusing on those items in our math and in our English and composition. We have hired new faculty specifically with skill sets that can come in and focus in on developmental math and developmental English. We've created some programs in our math courses and our technical education courses. What we have found is that over the years, we've had lots of students not complete their associate degree, primarily because of their reading, writing, mathematical skills that they're struggling with. They become very good technicians, great welders, great diesel mechanics, great A&P aviation mechanics. But one of the big reasons they do not finish is because they do not finish a math class or an English class to get that complete associate degree. And so what we have done is we have taken that remedial education, worked with those specialized math and English courses that they need to take for their AAS degree, and worked to make them very applicable to the type of work that or the type of schooling that they're getting. So if you're a diesel mechanic, a welding student, or a construction technology student, that mathematical course is wrapped around that type of education. So when they do algebraic activities, Pythagorean theorem type activities, it is very applicable to what they're doing in their programs. We have also looked at in our math courses to bring in our non-traditional students who have stopped out for a number of years, have come back and found out they're just a little bit rusty, and rather than have them test in through the compass testing into an 095 or whatever math course and stay there, what we've done is enroll them in an 095 course, and then as they have developed those skills very quickly, we move them to the next segment. So within a year's time, they can actually pass through 3 different types of courses, get the credit for the one that they stop out in, and then instead of spending 3 semesters to get to where they need to be, they spend a semester and then get to pass on much further down the road. So they're not spending so much time in the remedial education areas. I passed out a document to you that tells a little bit about Helena, and what I was wanting to do here is really show you what Helena is doing or has been doing, or where we're at in relationship to the College Now agenda, the comprehensive community college. And so what we did is we outlined the College Now statement, mission statement, vision on one side of the document, and then Helena on the other side of the document. And what you're going to see is there's a parallel all the way down that document. Helena, for all purposes intended, and by this definition, is a comprehensive two-year college. The one thing that, as the research bore out recently, was the only thing we were lacking on this particular agenda was the ABE GED activity. And I can tell you right now that in working with our district, that by the end of this academic year will be a part of our day-to-day operation. And I'm very confident on that. There is some great conversation going on right now. And then we shared a few things with you in regards to our history that we're very proud of, that really make us Helena, and very known to our community, very known to our students. And one of the things that we debate more than anything else on the College Now initiative is a title, a name of the institution, and how we'll fit in to the greater two-year system, and with that particular name. We're not sure where that's going to go yet. That's still a great deal of discussion there. But I can tell you that, that in Helena, with our students, faculty, and staff, that's the name that we've come to be known by, and we appreciate that, and we're very proud of that association with the University of Montana system. 2 other things I'd like to share with you. We have 2 campuses. One is our more technical campus, one more of a general education campus. We have struggled with our students to be able to cut the cost of going from one campus to the next time-wise so that they can get all their programs in, and we've struggled with that and trying to figure out how can we make that more economical for them. We're in the process now of finalizing the agreement to start purchasing VoIP communication system for the campus, which will then allow us to extend out telecommuting opportunities between campuses, not only for educational purposes, but also for discussion purposes between our faculty organizations, between administration and staff, and such, so that we can cut down on some of that travel between campuses, which takes a great deal of time between those 2 campuses. Not only that, we have found out that by going to this VoIP system, we will save the institution after paying for itself, and it'll take 3 years for us to do that. We'll start saving ourselves about $30,000 a year by going to this new system after our initial investment. And then the last thing that we are enjoying right now as we take a look at Helena from the comprehensive standpoint is the development or expansion of individual courses that we have not had in the past, such as music appreciation, art appreciation. and believe it or not, a real political science course on our campus. You know, you think that being in the state capitol, that would be just a natural. But as we started looking around and said, you know, I think we're missing a couple key individual classes. And so that's what we're doing right now. We're looking at our courses, rounding out to become more comprehensive and offer more to our students so that they can go different places with some very key courses in their arsenal. And those are some of the things we'll continue to do in the future. We're looking at pre-education and partnering with our universities and with Carroll College in our own town. We are exploring areas in the area of pre-engineering. We would like to get our students who are time and place bound to the four-year colleges and give them an opportunity. So we already have in our arsenal many of the courses that we just need to package, add a few more courses too, and that student then can pick up a majority of what they need before they go to a four-year college. So those are some of the things that we're very excited about. Along with that, we appreciate the reallocation of money in MSU and UM. We appreciate your help on that. We've hired 7 new faculty, which is significant for our campus. And two of those faculty in a remedial or in developmental education. That's all I have. Do I have a question? I have lots of questions. Thank you, Dr. Engstrom, I appreciate that. One question I would offer up to the board, and I've been thinking about quite a bit, is as there has been some discussion in the past several years about duplication. As we are a two-year college and our primary mission is to meet the regional and local needs, how does the board feel about that particular issue and as it applies to the College Now mission and vision? That would be my question.
Regent Barrett?
Obviously, I'm speaking for myself and not the board. Those type of issues have never bothered me with the 2 years. I think you said it exactly correctly. Their locus is local, and it would be a rare thing, I think, when that would be an issue in that context.
Regent Teal.
And I also want to say that I really like some of the comments you made about general education and sort of pathways towards four-year education. I know we've talked about pathways initiatives between K-12 and higher ed, and I also think that extends partway to the two-year colleges and universities, having some advising and ideas for students who are perhaps seeking an associate's degree or a two-year education, but also are perhaps interested in particular pathways towards four-year degrees.
Other question? Okay. President Engstrom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I do appreciate Regent Barrett's softball earlier today to talk about our #1 ranking in the West. Might highlight a few reasons for that. We are very proud. Our faculty and staff do an unbelievable job in educating our students, and we're very proud of our 95% placement rate prior to graduation of our students. In our tagline is in demand, and we are certainly in demand coming out of Montana Tech. We are also, as President Engstrom mentioned, one of the top 20% of all universities that are GI friendly. Just a couple of other points. It speaks to our academic nature. As most of you probably know here, Montana Tech leads the state in athletic prowess, and we are a bit confused about the festivities here. Montana Tech was scored #2 in the nation in the NAIA Champions of Character. A few team GPAs. Our men's football team is a 2.98, women's volleyball 3.33, our men's basketball 2.91, and our women's basketball 3.25. One of the few athletic teams in the nation that can have a couple of nurses, a couple of engineers, a couple of biologists, and a business major on the starting lineup. So we're very proud of that, and I think it does speak to that ranking very well. I also would like to mention very briefly our TRIO program. We collaborate around the state. Amy Verlanik is an incredible person as she has recently won $1 million grant for that. We team with MSUB on the Veterans Trio program. We team with our affiliation in a variety of ways. And so when I claim 800 students or children's lives that are touched, I'm probably claiming some from other institutions, but I think that that's an unbelievable program that is providing access to some of our areas that are especially economically depressed. In terms of a question that I would pose, and I would pose it ahead of time, you've already heard me espouse about collaboration and how we can share our courses among each other. So I would start that out as a question of what are, I'm going to give you maybe some barriers, members of the board, that we might have in that process, and then maybe get some advice for how we go about tackling those as we move forward. Looking at programs like our, been talked about some statewide energy centers, this new Center for the EPSCoR program, and you've heard President Schaefer talk about advances in lab technologies, virtual technologies, and Dean Bingham talk about some of the things they're doing. I think it's really important that we look at some of the challenges that will face us as we look at collaborative programs and courses, hardware being one of those. We would you know, I don't want to get bogged down, but just maybe some advice as we work through some of the revenue distribution problems as we collaborate on coursework. How do we increase faculty collaboration amongst the institutions and across both systems? Should you have course numbering or just articulation agreements among graduate programs? How do we do graduate advising with joint programs, and how do we advantage that? And in general, you know, in looking at some of the discussions this morning with the IOE proposal that was approved or will be approved, and other centers around the state, just some advice on how that collaboration can work would be helpful, and how we begin that process in an effective way. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Any questions or comments for discussion? Anything to add? President Engstrom, anything further?
Okay, Provost Brown will talk about the Global Leadership Initiative on the Missoula campus.
Good, thank you very much. First, we're going to pass around a couple of things, and the first one for the board, I've asked Carl just to share with you the latest version of our research magazine, Vision, which, at least for me, has a stunning picture on the front. I would ask that maybe you don't spend too much time opening that while I'm talking, because I'm not going to talk about that. But I'm going to talk fairly rapidly so that you can get to that pretty soon, so we won't have to spend a lot of time about that. I'm also going to pass around a little flyer here with regard to our Global Leadership Initiative, which I want to talk about. But first, I want to mention one other item. There was a very, very nice article in the Ravalli Republic, I think yesterday or maybe the day before, with regard to the expansion of space and facilities at the Bitterroot College program. This is a program in the last 2 years that has grown by a factor of 8. And so it's rapidly expanding, and it was out of space, and we were able to acquire some additional space that we had to remodel within the same facility where we have been teaching and where we're co-located with the job service in Ravalli County right now. And so just a lovely article that was there. So if you have a chance to get on the Ravalli Republic website or something, you can see what is there, or I can make that available to anybody later on, because I have the URL somewhere on my computer. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that because that program has been doing very well and growing very rapidly, and now is excited about having some space so that they can actually teach those courses that they have in places where the students are not stacked on top of each other. What I'd like to talk about this afternoon is what we're calling the Global Leadership Initiative. And this is a component of our strategic issue dealing with education for the global century, one of our 5 target strategic issues that we have for the University of Montana, Missoula. This particular initiative that we have is designed to really provide a context for the students and the major in which they're studying. It's to provide students with relevance, it's to engage them in educational processes and learning and solution building, and it's
a way, I think, to channel some of that passion that they bring to the university about different social and institutional and business and other topics that they have. We were fortunate last week to have Carol Snyder, the president of AAC and U, which is a national organization. We were fortunate to have her on our campus last week to really share with us some ideas about reform of undergraduate education. AAC and U is the leading national organization dealing with reform of undergraduate education. And she worked with us on workshops, on panels, on presentations, with some of our task force efforts, with faculty and students and staff that were engaged in thinking about our Global Leadership Initiative and just how we really position ourselves in the future. And it's really nice to be able to attract national leaders such as Carol to the state of Montana, that they come here because of some innovative things that are going on, but also to share their wisdom, their ideas, and help us as we build our programs. Now let me just give you a really quick summary of the Global Leadership Initiative. You have on that sort of gray sheet there, you have 4 components. I'm actually going to add a 5th to that picture, but let me just begin and start with that. The first one is component 1, the context of global questions, big ideas. And so we have seminars that we offer to a cohort of freshman students that really deal with big ideas like food and food security, global trade issues, public health issues, energy futures, whatever it happens to be. There are a lot of these big, big issues that people have some interest in and some passion about, and we're helping to give them a multidisciplinary perspective on what these things are and how they can participate in those from the disciplines that they have chosen to major in. So that's the first component, the big questions, the big issues seminars. The one that's not on this sheet is helping the students select pathways through the general education requirements that actually reinforce their investigation of those big issues. You can move through general education in a random form, or you can figure out how different components fit together. And we're helping to find some pathways for them and to advise them. This is part of the advising structure, and counsel them on what's going to link together and really be useful as they explore these big ideas. Then the models of leadership component, which is really to provide leadership development and leadership experiences for our students. And this is going to take many different forms. One form that we've talked a lot about and we will really implement, or for sure implement, is some leadership retreats, where we have people from a much wider community than Missoula, experts from around the world, come and share at least a weekend with a small group of students that are interested in what they do and the topic that they represent, and interested in their life stories and how they became national or international scientists or business people or health workers or whatever it happens to be. That we're going to bring our students together with these international and national leaders so that they really have a chance to see and learn from people who are at the leading edge of their particular fields. In addition, we're going to do some leadership training through seminars and through other workshop experiences so the students actually learn some of the skills and some of the concepts of leadership so that they can begin to see themselves in a different light than they would if they just go through the programs that we have and never quite understand that leaders occur in all positions at all levels, and if you see yourself as potentially a leader and have some of the skills, you can be that if you want to. You don't have to wait for somebody to appoint you to a leadership position to be a leader. And so we want to really help develop the skills and knowledge that these students can have and use, and then actually have them learn from people that have developed these skills and knowledge on their own and are out in the world as leading edge people, as international and national leaders in various fields and various areas. The third major component, or now since I added one, I guess the fourth major component of this particular thing, is we want the students, every student in this program, to have what we would call a beyond the classroom experience, the co-curricular activities. internships, study abroad, which we talked about a little bit this morning, undergraduate research, civic engagement experiences, maybe more than one of these experiences, but every student having at least one of these experiences in their career. And we want them to feel empowered to go out in the world and do something outside of the normal classroom and laboratory context and really work with people who are rolling up their sleeves and doing things in the community, doing things in Bangladesh, doing things in Washington, D.C. or New York or wherever it happens to be that they choose to accept these experiences that we hope that they will have and in fact will require of the students within the cohorts that are following this path in the Global Leadership Initiative. And then the last part of it is bringing it all together. Bringing it together in capstone experiences, boardroom type experiences where the students from many different disciplines are focused on a major project, a major issue that they're going to work on, and they're going to be bringing their talents, their knowledge, the things that they have been doing over the last 3.5 years or so, and bring it to bear on a particular set of problems within that big idea that they have so that they can really participate in finding solutions to problems and coming forward with white papers and other kinds of things that will suggest how we might approach the resolution of some of the issues that we have or solve some of the problems that we have within the world or the country. So those are the components of the thing. We're beginning with a cohort of approximately 200 students, 200 freshmen, new students to the University of Montana. Those students were randomly selected. We didn't go to the Honors College and say, we need all the honor students or something like that. We said, we want a cross-section or as much of a cross-section of the university new students as we can have in this program so that everybody has a chance to participate that really wants to. So we randomly selected a bunch and invited them to participate, asked them to get in touch with us, asked them to come to some events that we were having that would tell them more about the program, and they could select themselves into the program. We also solicited big ideas for the seminars from the faculty members that wanted to provide those with an emphasis on truly big ideas, but also an emphasis on co-teaching and across various departmental and disciplinary boundaries so that we could really get multi-disciplines and a multidisciplinary perspective on these things. And the faculty responded with more than we needed. For 200 students, we felt we needed at least 10 of these seminars, 20 students per seminar, and we had many more, and then our committee that's been working on this, faculty committee, selected the 10 that they would have for this coming spring. We have another call out for the fall now, so we get a new cohort next fall in this. The students are in the process right now of getting themselves matched up with the various big ideas seminars so that they'll be in the ones that really take advantage of the passion that they have within their bodies and within their minds and get themselves matched up with this. The students are also attending presidential and other lectures on campus to learn about big ideas from people that are coming to the campus and sharing things with us right now, so they get even thinking about this more and more than they had been before. And the students are participating in GLI orientation sessions and a number of things that are going on campus to really engage this group of 200 students in the cohort. There are no additional costs for these students. They, have their majors, and all of the courses that we have are either within their majors or within their elective credit requirements. Now, some may choose to do a few more things, but they don't have to do extra things other than get this parallel track with their major that really provides a context for things. One of the small things that we're doing, but we think it has a very big symbolic notion of helping them think about who they are and what they could be, is when they pass through the second year of the program, we will purchase for every one of these students a passport. Now, a lot of students have passports, but a lot of them never even thought that that was in their future, to go somewhere. Some of them won't use that in the first year, but passport's good for 10 years. So some of them will, 5 years down the road, discover that, hey, I can go to Tanzania, or I can go to Bangladesh. And they will be ready to go. But hopefully we'll plant the seed that this is in your future, that you are a global citizen and you are going to bring that back to Montana. And so we're going to do that. That's just one of the little things we're doing. The last thing that I would say about this program, which we're really excited about, and we've got a lot of students that are really excited about this right now, is that the financial support is primarily coming from private donors. We have had incredible response from the private sector, from people that care about the education of students and the opportunity they see this providing to build a different kind of student, to help to graduate a different kind of student out of the University of Montana. And they are coming forward with the money to support this particular program. I don't know the exact percentage, but I would guess that right now we're probably at 95% of the money coming from the private sector, with a little bit of seed money that we put in institutionally to get it off the ground. So I would stop with that in terms of description of the program. A question that I would have for the board is, to what extent might you, given your experiences, your contacts, really be in a position to help us with relevant contacts for leadership development, co-curricular activities, and capstone experiences? And then if I turn it right on you, might you want to participate personally in developing these students for the future? Thank you.
Anybody want to tackle that?
Mr. Chairman, while you're thinking about how soon you want to volunteer, let me just make a couple of other comments, because I want to emphasize two things about this Global Leadership Initiative. One, we really view this as an important tool for success of students of all types, of all kinds. This idea of providing them a context of what's important around them in the world, we feel is critical to getting them engaged in their education, getting them actively involved in designing their own undergraduate education. So that freshman experience of exposure to the big questions is a relevancy aspect of this that we think is important to today's students. That the beyond the classroom experience is another way that students get engaged, and whether they are the clear leadership kinds of students that we all see and have on our campuses, or the student who doesn't see himself or herself in a leadership position at all, getting those students engaged beyond the classroom is, as Perry said, a way of instilling in them and helping them discover their own leadership potential, however that plays out. The AAC&U involvement of this is an important piece of it. This is the Association of American Colleges and Universities. Let me just tell you a little bit about that organization, since you're probably not familiar with it. This is an organization that is really dedicated to thinking about what a liberal arts education means in today's world, taking the ideas of a traditional liberal arts education, translating those ideas into today's world. What does that mean in terms of fundamental skills, that in terms of quantitative literacy, communication skills? What does it mean in terms of making the connection between general education and the big questions that we face, and so on? This is a really aggressive and interesting national organization. And so last year, Arlene Walker-Andrews, our associate provost, took a faculty group to a workshop of AAC&U, and they actually spent the better part of a week designing this Global Leadership Initiative program in that workshop with other schools that were designing their own approaches to today's liberal arts education. So this is a program that is that relates very well to a national initiative to help us all think about today's education, and again, translating those values of the liberal arts that we all cherish so much into a contemporary education that produces leaders. So I just wanted to emphasize those points, and again, encourage you to think about Provost Brown's question. You are all in leadership positions yourselves, and you are the kind of people that we want to spend time with our students spend a weekend retreat with our students, talking about the principles of leadership, talking about really the big issues that you face in your businesses and your occupations, and helping our students think about their own futures in the kinds of positions that you have held. So we would really appreciate and look forward to your engagement in this program as well.
Thank you, President Engstrom. Regent Robinson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, wow. You know, I can hear your enthusiasm. I need to pull this so I can kind of turn. About this program, and I can see why. I think it's just like we started, I think, the discussions this morning about how what we do here is certainly globally connected, and the more that we consciously make that decision and are educating in that manner, the better off not only our university system will be, but the better prepared our students will be as they go out. So I think, first of all, you know, this in itself is a big idea, you know, so I really applaud that. I know first of all, getting back to your last question about participation, that's an easy one because I told my wife I wouldn't volunteer for anything anymore. But with that in mind, though, is that I certainly feel like we have connections that we want to make sure are working as well as possible too. So if I can be of assistance in that way, that's how I'll lend my expertise. I know the projects that I choose to work on now in my own private business are much geared that way, is that they can't just be for profit, but there has to be some social purpose for it. There has to be an opportunity to teach others to do either what I'm doing or what someone else that I'm working with is doing. So what you're talking about, I think, really is applicable. The more that the students can have hands-on, still have the coursework that they're responsible for, but to have that experience is going to make that difference. And to have that experience in a type of global arena, even more so. I was fortunate early on in my career to, just a year after graduation, to move to Tokyo, Japan for a job for 6 months, which turned into 2 years. And it really shaped everything that I did after that. So I think the earlier someone gets a chance to realize that how we're connected to the other parts of the world, and we are, we may try to, you know, tell ourselves we aren't, but we are, the better. So if I can assist in that manner, I certainly will, and I definitely applaud the direction that this is going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regent Barrett.
I mean, it really sounds exciting. I'm just curious, how does this work with regular majors? Is this its own one, or if someone's coming and wants to be in any particular discipline, is this like an overlay? How does this work with the?
Regent Barrett, this runs parallel with the major, so that a student may be a sociology major, maybe a biology major or something else, and they're bringing their talent to this parallel path that provides some usefulness, sometimes of actually the courses in the major, but also some elective credit that they have, so that they can just parallel this and have an organized way to do it. So it shouldn't be any more than they're doing right now in terms of credits, but it should be more than they're doing right now in terms of some of the work and engagement that they have, because it's a parallel thing. And it allows them to put their major in the context, as President Engstrom said, of some set of issues and problems, and to interact with students coming from other majors to focus on these issues as well.
Thank you. President Engstrom.
Regent Barrett, if I could maybe illustrate that with an example. Let's say one of the big questions that the freshmen have an opportunity to take involves energy. the question, where is our energy going to come from in the future? And so students who participate in that big question may end up moving through the curriculum in all kinds of majors. There will be students who might be interested in that from a scientific point of view, from a policy point of view, from an economic point of view, even an historical point of view, for example. When students come back at the senior level to participate in the capstone, the way we envision that capstone is essentially a boardroom experience where, say, 20 students are sitting around the table and they design a specific question, a specific policy issue. For example, the students who came out of that general question about where does our energy come from might design for themselves the challenge of saying, what should Montana's policy toward the Bakken be? How should we approach development of the Bakken? What we envision then is that those 20 or so students bring their expertise from science backgrounds, from economic backgrounds, whatever major they have. You can approach that question from just about any major you might think about, health-related majors and so on, and design then a policy paper, a white paper, if you will, on that question, that specific question. We expect that paper, that position, to be of a quality that we could forward it to our policymakers here in Montana or at the federal level as serious considerations for them to look at. And so we want both those interdisciplinary, those introductory seminars and the capstone experiences to be deliberately interdisciplinary kinds of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Okay, we need to move on though, so Regent Teal.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm also really impressed with this program. I think that somewhat accidentally it's mirroring what my education has been at MSU through a non-curricular student organization, Engineers Without Borders. So I really applaud you for what you're doing. It's been really influential in my life, and I'm glad to see it come about as curriculum.
Regent Teal, I think you are a great example. Some of our students put this kind of education together for themselves with the help of mentors and so on, and you clearly have done that. And look at what it has done for you. We want that kind of experience to be available to all of our students eventually. We're starting this on a manageable scale of 200 entering freshmen, but after a 3-year period, we'll step back and say, now, what scale should we operate this on, and how do we scale up to that appropriate level? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's an exciting project, and President Engstrom, admire you for taking this on as part of your new presidency unfolds, and we look forward, I'm sure all board members, of participating and helping any way we can. We're going to take a very quick break, try to start by about 3:30 on to the budget committee meeting.
Well, you're cutting me off.
Regent McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The information items will be moved until after the action items are discussed, so we can allow for maximum discussion on the action items. We will now move to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like to have pulled? Okay, then we will move forward to the items listed on the action agenda. Okay, and we will begin with item A, a new academic classroom and office building, the College of Business that we've been hearing so much about here on the MSU campus. And for more discussion on that, I will turn to President Cruzado.
Thank you, Madam Regent, and members of the board. It's a great pleasure for me to bring to your consideration a request for the authorization to design a new academic building at Montana State University. This new building would be a College of Business. As you know very well, the College of Business continues to grow in terms of student enrollment. Presently, they occupy the 3rd and 4th floors of Reed Hall in a structure that has served us well, but certainly it's not a model of modern classroom technology. What we would like to do is to design a new building and eventually move the College of Business to a new state-of-the-art teaching facility. The building that we are envisioning would be dedicated 100% to instruction. What we are thinking is a building that would be about perhaps 40,000 square feet, that would include modern teaching facilities of various sizes, and including an academic advising center and student service facilities, student organization facilities, transition areas for faculty, students, and staff, conference and meeting space, but particularly a building that will be innovative, bold, entrepreneurial, just as the person who has helped us reach this goal. At this moment, what we are requesting from the board is authorization to proceed with the planning and design of the building. For that purpose, we intend to use $1.6 million. The source of funding is a private donation that has been made to MSU Foundation. And finally, we expect that to use this time to conduct consultation with some committees that we will have in place. We envision that this will also be a LEED certified building that will serve as a model, not only for MSU, but certainly for the state of Montana. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Madam President. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Regent Barrett.
Well, it's, some of you had the chance to be at the ceremony when Jake Jabs made this gift. He was there. And if you were there, the vision that he has at age 82, something like that, we should all have. It was just amazing. And the concept of the building and the concept of what they want to do there, and I think he will continue to be a big part of it. It's really exciting. So we could go on and on about how good a deal it is to have someone step up to play for $25 million for the Montana University system, but it's pretty exciting. We'll have some other, challenges to deal with, but life couldn't be better.
And I would like to point out again that Mr. Jabs will be joining us tomorrow for the vote. We really wanted for him to participate and have an opportunity to meet you. This is certainly an extraordinary man, nothing short of it. I think he truly exemplifies the risk-taking nature of a true entrepreneurial man.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Thank you, Madam President. I look forward to moving this forward to tomorrow's agenda. A great conversation. Next, we have item B, a $300,000 request for the renovation of Wilson Hall Writing Center. And for that, I will turn to Terry Least.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Yes, the Wilson Hall Writing Center is currently in sort of a separated state. It has a space of about 385 square feet along with an office space for a total of around 713 square feet. The desire for this is to bring this facility and renovate it up in a different room at 1,017 square feet. So expand the space and make this space a much more contemporary space with windows and open space to the hallway with glass features, and just a great place for the students to congregate. Currently, our writing center is already well used at about 3,400 students per year. It's a very heavily used facility, but it is very cramped. And this facility would, or this renovation project would allow us to expand that and provide a much better learning environment. The fees, our student fees would support this. These are student building fees. These fees are used for debt service, but we do have a reserve in place that would allow us to pay cash from this particular portion. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Regent Robinson.
Madam Chairman, I do have a question, just trying to quickly do the math on it. You said is it 1,000 additional square feet, or it's renovating the existing square footage?
Madam Chair, Regent Robinson, yeah, it will be 1,017 square feet in total, the revised space.
I'd like to follow up. I'm just kind of curious then, certainly it sounds like it's something that's very much needed. At $300,000 for that, it seems like a lot of money for such a small space.
Yeah, originally it was meant to be 2 rooms together, and I don't believe the estimate's actually been changed a lot since then. So there's 2 rooms side by side, both of which have brick exteriors. Because of our classroom situation right now, we decided recently at a Space Management Committee meeting to reduce this to just one of these rooms rather than both. But we want to put the windows in both of these rooms because we do want to have the opportunity later to expand it. So that's part of the issue. So this existing classroom that won't be part of the writing center at this point, we do want to partially renovate that so that when additional classroom space becomes available, we can just essentially knock out that middle wall, expand the writing center to what our original design was.
Thank you. Are there further questions or comments from members of the board? Thank you. It sounds like this is a great opportunity to increase access to the Writing Center for all of the students here. So look forward to voting on that tomorrow. Now we will move on to item C, which is the design and construction of the Museum of the Rockies Planetarium upgrade. And for that, I will turn again to Terry Least.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, the Museum of the Rockies Planetarium originally was opened 22 years ago in 1989, and certainly the technology at that time was very good. Over that time period, as you can imagine, technology has far surpassed what we have right now. And so this upgrade will allow us to, again, be one of the premier facilities in the country. A large portion of the expense, about 60% of the total cost, would go into audio and video equipment, not necessarily the construction part of it. So a lot of this has to do very specifically with the technology. Again, the funding for this is 100% non-state funds. This will be initially from the reserves of the Museum of the Rockies, but fundraising, grants, that type of thing would be used to replace those reserves. I think that's what I have for now. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments? Regent Barrett?
I'll simply say, because I live here, I've had maybe more of an opportunity to enjoy both the museum and the planetarium than most have. It's an amazing facility, and it was amazing in '89 when they did it, but with new state-of-the-art equipment, it'll be more than amazing. So and it's private dollars. It'll be a great addition to that library museum.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Thank you. I just want to dovetail, if I could quickly, on your comments. The Museum of the Rockies is certainly a great asset to Bozeman, but also to the state as well, and to the educational community in the state. They open their doors to students year in and year out, and sometimes they're students from Anaconda, and that's why I was on the phone with a gal the other day from there, and they were very excited about this vote. So thank you for bringing it forward on their behalf.
Thank you. Yeah, we are very proud of the facility ourselves. Thanks.
Okay, then for item D, we will turn to Chancellor Groseth for the mechanical and electrical system repair in the sub at MSU Billings.
Thank you, Chairman Swain. The board will recall that last spring, or last March actually, I brought forward a master plan for our auxiliary and athletic facilities, and we have accomplished some of the things already in that plan, and this is a further step to begin to tick off of these items. These are infrastructure items, this one in particular.
to replace 50-year-old chillers and other aspects of the mechanical system of our student union building. And these will be in advance of a major renovation of the building next summer.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move this forward to tomorrow.
Madam Chair, I might indicate that part of this money will be an intercap loan, and we have some pledged revenues there, and we've gone to our students and asked permission to utilize student building fees for those, and I'd like to call on our ASMSUB President, James Catlin, to visit with you about that.
Thank you, members of the board. This survey was given November 2nd, 2011, from 8 to 4 p.m., just one day, and people could only vote once. It was distributed throughout the main campuses and the COT by the respective senators, and also put online, so a copy would pop up as soon as a student logged in. The total, I guess, yes and no. Yes, we had 517 responses, and no for 107. Grand total of 624, which is 12% of the student population.
Thank you.
May I ask a question just quickly of James? James, have you been, if I may, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, have you been surveying students like that with the pop-up, and has it been quite effective to get student input, or have you compared it to?
Yeah. When we have, I guess the only other time we do pop-ups, and then the survey was required by board policy when money's over $200,000, but then during the election time for when senators are elected and all that sort of stuff, and so yeah, it's
And
effective.
it is helping, it's productive.
Because it reaches that contingent of online-only students.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, then we'll move on to item E, the Curry Health Service renovation. And for that, we'll turn to, okay, the University of Montana. I didn't have it in.
Madam Chair, we'll have Rosie Keller address this
thank
issue,
you.
please.
Chair McLean, members of the committee. As you recall, this item came forward in September as an information item, this renovation of the Curry Health Service. It's really driven by for two reasons. One is the student demand for the services and the changing healthcare environment. The renovation, what it really does is it utilizes existing space in a much more efficient, effective manner. And it does that in a way that it'll provide more service to students at no increased cost to the students. They're going to be able to do it within their existing fee. They also have a very solid financial plan for this. It's about a $4 million project. Knowing this was coming, they have set aside $1 million in their R&R account. We would finance the balance of that with an intercap loan. When we run those numbers at 4%, it comes out to about $250,000 a year, which they operationally can support, because they also had a decrease in their debt service last year of $125,000. Like I said, we ran that at 4%. The current rate is 1.95. So financially, it's a very feasible project, and it will be a great benefit to our students. I stand for any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, then, thank you. We look forward to moving this forward to tomorrow. And now we'll turn to item F, and for that then, the reorganization of Montech, I'll turn to Mr. Derringer.
Mr. Chairman, member of the board. Established in 2001, Montech was a joint venture between the Missoula Area Economic Development Corporation and the university. And for 10 years, it served as a business or a high-tech incubator for Missoula. On October 6 of 2011, MAEDC dissolved, leaving a very complicated financial situation with 9 separate parties having various obligations and claims on this property. To ensure the viability of Montech and also the viability of Rivertop Renewables, a major new tenant in Montech, the university was basically forced to step in and take charge of the situation. MAADC and their foundation relinquished all of their interest in Montech to the university. So even though it is still a separate 501c3 organization, we are in control of it. So to make this all work out right, we've assumed property management responsibilities. We have a dozen clients, tenants rather, in Montech. The upcoming $3.5 million construction project we will manage. And we also take care of all the financial services to make sure that all the billings to the tenants and everything, all the bills are paid. We will also provide bridge assistance for the next couple years, and that'll take all kinds of different forms, whether it's snow plowing, construction services, as I mentioned, a receptionist, different people to keep the organization going, because Montech, via the pro forma that we have done, will be cash negative for 2 years. So during that period of time, the university will put forth bridge funding to keep them viable, and then they will repay that funding. So in 2 years from now, this thing will all be back, Montech on its own bottom. Things should be going forward. The construction project will be done. Rivertop will be in good shape. So what we have here is a kind of an exigent circumstance where we had to step in and do a lot of things for Montech. But I think it's turning out wonderfully so far. We've got this huge ball of string that was put before us has kind of unraveled in a way we liked it to. So I think we're in relatively good shape as we speak today. So I would stand for your questions.
Thank you. Yes, Board Member Tess.
Do you envision Montech continuing to, in the future, serve as an economic development incubator for Western Montana? Its function will remain as is?
Members of the Board of Regents, Tuss, absolutely. Rivertop Technologies, Renewables, is a major new company in Montech, and it will become our anchor tenant, and they intend to stay there in perpetuity. So they will have a very large investment from the Economic Development Administration, from the university, and their own venture capital raised fund to put product out onto the market. We also have another dozen clients in there right now. So, I mean, it is a high-risk business. All these incubators, they come and go. So as people are successful, they move out and establish their own companies. As they fail, they leave. But for the last 10 years, it's been a flow of people succeeding and failing. But it's been really fortunate for us that we've landed a tenant of the high quality of Rivertop Renewables.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, then we thank you for your presentation. And then on to item G, and I will turn to Dr. Engstrom regarding the authorization to name the University Theater the George and Jane Dennison Theater.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. So we bring before you a request for approval to rename the University Theater in honor of George Dennison and his wife Jane, who served the university for 20 years as president, the longest-standing president of the University of Montana. We have been thinking over this past year of the appropriate building facility to name after George, and the University Theater came as the logical choice for a variety of reasons. One, George had a major hand in renovating the theater in the 90s to make it the centerpiece of the campus that it currently is. Two, the University Theater is the site of so many different kinds of activities on campus: academic lectures, musical performances, outside performances, and so on. It's just a very heavily used theater for many of our signature programs at the campus. And so it will be highly visible and a place that will, we think, readily take on the new name of the Dennison Theater. And so it's the right thing to do, and we're pleased to honor George and Jane in this way. Now, I know that you have received a letter from an individual objecting to or expressing concern about this naming, and I'd like to address that if I could. The individual is Ms. Tracy Dukes from Missoula, and unfortunately, her husband was killed in the renovation project of the University Theater back in the 90s. Most of us currently at the university weren't here then, and so we didn't really know a whole lot of detail about that event. But because her husband was killed, unfortunately, she didn't feel like this was an appropriate thing to go ahead and do. I've talked with Ms. Duke on the phone about this and learned quite a bit about the details of the accident myself from her and from then our investigation of the reports written around it. Mr. Duke worked for a private contractor, and there was a scaffolding issue. Scaffolding collapsed, and unfortunately he died in that accident. It was a private contractor. He was not an employee of the university. He was an employee of the contractor. The legal aspects of that case were settled long ago. But I did express to Ms. Duke that we would like to recognize and honor her husband as part of this renaming process. And so we talked through how that might play out, and we agreed that we would put some sort of plaque, some sort of recognition inside the theater acknowledging the loss of Mr. Duke and his contribution to the project. She was very moved by that, very appreciative of that, and as a result of that conversation indicated, yes, it would be fine to go ahead with the naming in her mind under those circumstances. So we will, subject to your approval, proceed with the renaming, and over the course of this spring, talk further with Ms. Duke about the wording on the plaque and the placement and that sort of thing, in anticipation of having then a ceremony probably close to commencement time when we would actually unveil the new name, if you will, and then the plaque inside as well. So with that, be happy to answer any further questions about that, about this project or that incident. Thank you.
Thank you, President Engstrom, and thank you for your very positive communication and leadership on behalf of the University of Montana and us in that regard. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move this forward till tomorrow. And now we will go back to the information items, and we'll begin with the trust lands update. And I think what we'll do here is visit initially with Kathy Swift from the Office of the Commissioner, and then after Kathy provides the update, then we will invite President Cruzado and Mr. Least, as well as Dr. Blackheader and Maggie Peterson from Montana Tech regarding the impact or the potential impact of declining trust land revenues. So, Kathy, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you know, we've been following Senate Bill 409 since it was introduced into the legislative session last year. And we've been following it since its passage before the end of the session and through the summer and into the fall. Sorry. We've been following Senate Bill 409, which I think, as you will all recall, revises the rate-setting process for those leases of recreational lands, trust lands, which benefit our campuses, primarily Montana State University and Montana Tech. We've been following that legislation, and now since the end of the legislative session, we've been following the implementation of that legislation, which is the job of the Montana Land Board as through its staff of the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, DNRC. So I just wanted to give you an update and let you know that they have proposed rules to interpreting Senate Bill 409 and implementing it. And those rules are in the comment period. I don't know that they're final. There will be a chance for DNRC to change them after the comment period. We will, of course, engage in the comment period and make our comments to those rules. That will be in December. And in January, the Land Board will, the DNRC will propose final rules to the Land Board, and final rules will no doubt be adopted by the Land Board. It's actually in the statute. So as far as the changes to any rates or any rate-changing impact that would affect our campuses, it probably won't take place until the end of 2012, because there is a rate-setting period that lasts from April through September. And actually, during the session, DNRC said the new rates wouldn't go into effect until probably 2013. So we will probably provide another update after the January rules are adopted, and at that time we'll know a little bit more about how this law and these rules are going to impact our campuses.
Thank you. Yes.
Comment before Terry begins. I thought just for information purposes, it would be I think, useful for you as board members to have a little perspective regarding the dollar amount of trust land revenue flow to Montana State University Bozeman and Montana Tech. Those are the two major beneficiaries of the trust land revenue flow. So an idea on the dollar amount, what it's presently used for, and I guess the consequences of the decline in revenue. So I've asked Terry and Chancellor Blackketter to provide a little overview of the impact on their campuses.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, yes, total land grant revenues along with timber sales for Montana State University run about $1.6 million average for the last couple of years. It's my understanding that the potential impact of this, there was an analysis done last March with an estimate of about $325,000 lost to Montana State. We use these revenues in combination with student building fees for debt service. And so if if this does decline, not that we would need to turn on student fees tomorrow, but in the next several years, we would need to see an increase in those fees to offset that because they are fully utilized for debt service. So, I did some quick math. If 325,000 is a good number, the current it's $80 a semester for that fee. That would have to go up by about $15 per semester or $30 per year. So there is definitely an impact on the student side to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the board? Regent Barrett?
Two questions. First for you, Terry. The 1.6 from which you'd lose 325, that's based on the current rates. If the rates were adjusted to meet the constitutional mandate in the 1997 decision, how much more would we be getting today? Because it's a couple points higher than they're currently charging, as I understand it.
Yes, there's no question at this point. At this point, I think they're charging 5% of the 2003 Department of Revenue appraisals. So that amounts to about 3.5%. The Supreme Court stated that 3.5% did not allow the recovery of full market value on those sites.
Okay, so we really can't figure out the number now, and I guess it doesn't matter. Second question is, if the DNRC rules are enacted as they're currently drafted, in your judgment, does it meet constitutional muster?
Madam Chair, Regent Barrett.
Or is that unfair?
I do want to see the final rules, of course, but as Senate Bill 409 was enacted, and taking aside whether DNRC is able to make those, constitutional, yes, some of the provisions, particularly the requirement that they be offered at 2%, and the requirement that they allow, that lessees who already have agreements with the state of Montana at certain lease rates be allowed to renege on those and take a lower rate. Those particular provisions would make them, in our opinion, and as far as DNRC has said, unconstitutional.
Yeah, thank you. That was kind of my point. I don't know that they can rule make around it, but we certainly have to give them a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Blackketter?
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair and Board of Regents. Is this on now? It's seeming to take some time to come on. There we go. Just as an information item from At the request of Deputy Commissioner Robinson, Montana Tech gets nearly 1.2 million a year. It's a very significant portion of our budget. It would represent 8% of what we get from the state currently. So it is a significant portion of our budget. For example, and this is certainly just an example, we would have to increase our student fees $35 per 100,000 of revenue that was lost. So if the entire amount was lost, as an example, that would increase student fees $238. So this is a significant event. We use, much like Montana State, we use this money in our auxiliary programs that help us pay our debt that has gone towards dormitories and other auxiliary services. So it is a significant event and discussion for Montana Tech. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Okay then, thanks to each of you for your presentations and your time on this. We'll now move to information item B, the energy performance contract update for MSU Bozeman. And for that, I'll turn to Mr. Least again, and I think you're great to stay right there if you're fine there.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Yes, this is strictly an information item, letting the board be aware that we intend to bring an $8.7 million energy-related project to you in January. This again is for our auxiliary facilities. No state dollars involved here, no state dollars or tuition. This project has been, or this energy performance contract method has been discussed with the board previously, as you know. We feel at this time this is an opportunity. It helps us not only with energy savings, but we have a lot of systems that are needing replacement right now anyway. And so it's a good combination of those things. So things that we're going to have to do in the next few years because of obsolescence of our existing systems can be rolled up into this. It's an efficient manner for us to do this, and we feel good after looking at it very strongly in the last 6 or 8 months that this is a good way for us to go. Again, this will take about 18 to 20 months to complete this project or projects. Most of the work will be done over the next 2 summers if the board so moves to approve this when we bring it forth in January. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those. I'm sorry.
Regent Teal.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that I'm familiar with some of the process that has brought this particular method forward, and which included, as I understand, a student and faculty task force that looked at the energy performance contracting methodology compared with other options. And I'm pretty confident that they gave this really good consideration. So I'm looking forward to the item coming forward in January, I think, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Regent Barrett?
I'm glad that this will be coming forward, and I think we need to take a step. I make the comment about this one, and I had the same comment on the biomass boiler, that to set aside the efficacy of the individual project. I hope as we move forward in the future, before we get into these, that we examine the process. I think this is a flawed process to have a consultant hired who works in the area to design work that will save you money and then becomes a contract that executes on it. I just don't think there are enough checks and balances in that system. Again, this is something about the future. It's not about this particular project, but had I known about that process when we got into these originally, I think I would have questioned it. So I'm not going to question the process in these. We can just look at the projects. But in the future, I hope before the institutions engage in these, we look at another way, or at least have a discussion at the board before we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Barrett. Further questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, thank you, Mr. Least. Okay, then Mick, we'll turn to you for item C on the information agenda, the audit reports.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we have attached to this item 3 audits that were heard in front of the Legislative Audit Committee on November 4th. The financial compliance audit for the Office of the Commissioner, which includes within that the transfer of dollars to the, to the campuses. It also includes our medical benefits program, our guaranteed student loan operation. The office received an unqualified opinion, a clean opinion on the financial statements as presented, and there were no recommendations for the office, which is the second time in a row. This is for the 2 fiscal years ended June 30th, 2011. So usually the Legislative Auditor's Office will have a recommendation or two. So I think a real tribute to Frida Hauser, our Director of Accounting and Budgeting, in terms of the close eye that she keeps on the activities within the office budget and transfer to the campuses. The MSU campuses and UM campuses were also reviewed. These were not financial audits, they were compliance audits. The auditor will look at a number of state statutes to determine whether or not the campuses are complying with that statute. They also spent a lot of time looking at Board of Regents policies to ensure that the campuses were complying with those policies. For the UM campuses, there were 3 recommendations for the UM campuses, and again, that's a very small number of recommendations that you would expect for the magnitude of the review and work that was done by the auditor's office. One of those recommendations is one that's similar in the MSU audit in terms of indirect costs and the relationship in terms of contracts with state agencies. And there was a consent item that was included on the Academic Affairs Committee agenda to make some adjustments to the policy relating to that particular issue. So with all of the recommendations, the campuses generally are moving to address those recommendations very quickly, and that's just an example of a step that was taken by our office along with the campuses to address at least one of the recommendations. All of the recommendations for the UM campuses were, the campus concurred with those recommendations, and I think they have corrections in place already to address all 3 items. On the MSU side, there were 10 recommendations, and that, in terms of past years, that's probably the normal number that you would expect. There is one of those recommendations that we've talked about before in terms of the waiver policy and the 2% threshold regarding non-resident students, and we are in the process of addressing that, and we would expect to be bringing some proposals to the board sometime in the spring, perhaps the March meeting, May meeting, to try to address that particular issue in terms of Board of Regents policy. And so as you look at the recommendations again from Montana State University, the campuses did concur with those recommendations and have many of the corrections already in place in terms of addressing those changes. Certainly be willing to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mick. Any questions or comments from members of the board regarding the audits from the campuses? Okay, then, thank you for that presentation. We'll now move to item D, which was added somewhat recently to the agenda. We'll turn to Dr. Blackketter. And just so board members know, we will be talking about a date in the coming weeks to address this, perhaps via conference call, their request for additional authority. So, Dr. Blackketter, if you would please address the dorm construction.
Madam Chair, Board of Regents, thank you for the opportunity. Prior to my time, you gave approval for us to explore and do some preliminary design on a living center on the Montana Tech campus, and we have followed up on that. We've hired an architect, Oz Architects, out of Missoula, and we have begun that process, looking at site planning, doing a brief campus plan activity on where to locate a dormitory, preliminary numbers on cost of the building, exploring whether 100-bed or 200-bed. And just to give you a perspective on that, we're currently, our dorm capacity is about 280 beds or so, and with 2,800 students, we're at about 10%. National norms for residential campuses are in the 20% range. Certainly, both University of Montana, Missoula, and Montana State are at or above those levels. And so we're looking at that possibility, and we bring it forward as an information item. You've certainly read it. Because I understand that there's some weather issues in Montana regarding construction. I'm remembering that from my past as well. And so if we were to proceed, and certainly a decision hasn't been made, and you can see the criteria by which we're basing our decision based upon being able to sell bonds at a reasonable rate, make sure that that facility will pay for itself, make sure that the rates we're charging would be acceptable to students, and do a market analysis to determine that we could fill that dormitory. But I appreciate the opportunity to keep you updated on that action item that was started in May. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate the update. Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Nick? Okay, thank you. We will get a date set shortly on when we can move that forward. So it is now the time in our committee when we ask for public comment. And the masses are on their way.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Blake Bjornson. I'm the student body president here in Bozeman. I just wanted to talk about the 4 items that have to do with our campus. Starting with the energy performance contract, I was a part of the committee that Joe talked about, and I think we have a pretty good consensus on campus that this is a great idea for us, and look forward to working on that more. The planetarium, I have the pleasure of serving on the board of trustees as the president of the student body, and have been working on the development of this project, and look forward to hopefully having ASMSU being one of the first donors to that project. So also look forward to working on that. The Wilson Hall Writing Center, the Student Senate here passed a resolution in support of the Writing Center, and so there's student support there as well. And finally, the College of Business. I know everybody's very excited, especially those College of Business students. In fact, I think some of them might postpone their graduation so that they can take a class or 2 in that building. So, and I know that the interim dean, Susan Dana, has already been working with some of the College of Business senators to be a part of the design. So students are behind every single one of the projects that we've talked about today for this campus, and look forward to seeing the vote tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you for that communication, and thank you for the work that you do to convey what's happening on your campus to your student body. We appreciate that, and then relaying that information back to us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Pat Downey. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees for the Museum of the Rockies, Inc. The Board of Trustees is committed to the planetarium upgrade, and we have some urgency behind this project, and we look forward to your support for the authorization to proceed with the design and construction of the planetarium upgrade. We approved a loan from our own reserves from the Museum of the Rockies, Inc. To pre-fund this project with the stipulation that the Board of Trustees will raise the funds to repay our own loan. We're also very confident that Shelley McCamey, the Executive Director of the Museum of the Rockies, and her staff are going to control the cost of the construction of the project, just as they've done successfully on other projects at the museum. We also want to reiterate there are no state funds involved in this project. It's all private funding, and the Board of Trustees will aggressively work amongst ourselves and with the museum to raise the funds for this project. The planetarium is a very important asset to the museum, Montana State University, the community of Bozeman, the state of Montana, and this region. For example, nearly 9 out of 10 school groups that visit the museum request a planetarium visit as part of their tours. We've also demonstrated the new technology in the planetarium for our Board of Trustees and for the National Advisory Board, and the technology is just awesome. And it'll be a new avenue, a new platform for outreach through the museum, and that's an important function of our mission. And that outreach does include all of the STEM functions: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So in summary, we really look forward to moving forward with this project and getting your authorization for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do and the outreach to our students across Montana.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I just wanted to address real quick Senate Bill 409 and the possible effect that that will have on student fees at Montana Tech. As Chancellor Blackadder mentioned, that would possibly raise fees up to roughly $238 per student, especially in the wake of tuition increases at the May meeting, 5% this year and then 5% again next year. That's just a very heavy toll for Montana Tech students, so I just wanted to bring that back up for your consideration. And then also in regards to the dormitory planning, everything has gone very well there. Students have been very supportive of all of that, and it's going great. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Any further public comment? Okay, then, Mr. Chair, before I turn it back to you, I think I have about 6 minutes, but what I have to say will not even take close to that. If I could just thank once again Mick and President Cruzado and Terry Least and President Engstrom and Mr. Duringer for all of the time that they have spent with me between the last meeting and today, helping me to further understand the very complex budgets on their campuses and on the campuses with which they work. I'm especially grateful for all of your time because I know that you don't have a lot of it to give up. And then from someone who has been the direct beneficiary of the benevolence of Montana State University and the campuses there, and the University of Montana and the campuses there, whether I be in need of a history professor and Dr. Rydell signs up to come to Anaconda, or whether I need information from the law school right away and Fritz Snyder in just a few minutes finds what I've been looking for a couple of days and faxes it over. I feel like I need to give back, and so Mr. Brown, in response to your request for assistance with your project, I gladly avail any of my expertise that I may or may not have to your efforts in moving forward. Thank you for the great work that you do. To you.
Nice job. We thank you for getting us back on track. The next item then is public comment, and I would take public comment for any item either on or not on our agenda. Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, Board, thank you very much for this time. I appreciate it. My name is Lisa Titus. I am the new director for a program called One Montana, and this is something that was brought to the Regent's attention a couple of years ago, and as it is beginning to gain some steam, it seemed appropriate to update you on the status of that program. One Montana's mission is to foster working relationships between urban and rural communities in Montana for the betterment of all, improved prosperity and sustainability. It's garnered a great deal of support from a number of organizations and individuals, and this year received a significant investment from the Packard Foundation, who sees this program as something that can not only be important for Montana, but potentially a model on a national level. This also received a number of letters of support from members of the legislature, both universities, and a number of other individuals, as well as Leadership Montana. A number of people see this as something that can be a big step forward for the state. The first step in building the program was hiring a program director, and that's me. Started on November 1st, so it's just my third week. My obvious next steps, important priorities will be fundraising, strategic and business planning so that we can truly lay out how this will function and how this will go forward. In the short term, I'm fortunate to be able to partner with both universities as part of One Montana on the update of the 2030 project, which takes a snapshot through research and data to tell us what Montana will look like in 20 years. This will dovetail with the Senate Joint Resolution 8, which urged the Montana university system to take a look at the rural-urban issue in the state and come back with a report. And this will be an important first step in that process. I want to thank you for this opportunity to be here. I hope that we can continue to update you as we go forward. I'm excited about this. I think it is a critical mission for the state of Montana. I think it fits in with many of the things that we've been discussing today in terms of bridging those divides, working together, and finding effective ways to make our entire state and everyone in the state prosperous and sustainable. And with that, I will thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa. Any other public comment on any items on our agenda or not on our agenda? Any public comment? Okay. We will have one last opportunity tomorrow for public comment as well. With that, though, we do have an executive session scheduled. We have one personnel item that we will discuss. So at this time, I'm going to close the meeting to discuss a matter of individual privacy. As the presiding officer, I have determined that the demands of individual privacy in this particular matter clearly exceed the merits of public disclosure, and therefore we will close the meeting. That meeting will take place upstairs at room 234. So I request board members would head up there, and once that meeting is concluded, we will recess for the day, and we will reconvene here tomorrow morning at 8:45, I believe, and we'll finish our meeting.